This is going to be challenging today because it's such a spread out room. It's going to be hard for us to hear each other. And the important reason we're all together is because we want to hear from you and we want to listen to each other. And that's really something we don't get enough opportunities to do. I really first want to start out by welcoming my community college president colleagues. I worked with so many of you, and there's some new faces, but when I was at Pikes Peak Community College, that's where I got my my first experience in higher education other than as being a student. And it really has shaped everything I've done. It's shaped my perspective since then. And so I had the opportunity to work with a number of folks back then, and I'm just glad that they're here because usually we just don't get them to our CEO meetings. And they have an important perspective because they're literally everywhere in the state. I also really do want to thank Pam. Pam and I have worked together for a long time since I started at Pikes Peak Community College and immediately had Pam's support. And we started sitting down together frequently to talk about ways we could better serve Southern Colorado. At the time, we were really just focused on El Paso County, but that really changed over time, especially after I went to CSU Pueblo, and we continued to talk about how we could collaborate. Now, I know, and all of you, who are campus leaders know that one of the things that you have to be very focused on is how do you make sure that your institution is financially sound and sustainable? And we know that in this state, you can't really look to the state to get much. You really are looking to enrollment. You're looking to students. You're looking to outside funders. And frankly, we often see ourselves as in competition with each other for those things. And so sometimes that, well, often, always, that colors our perspective when we're looking at ways that we can work together, because we do want to work together, but we also want to come out ahead at our own institutions. So I want to talk about that. How do we do that? How do we keep in mind some state goals while also recognizing the responsibilities that we owe to our campuses, to our particular boards of governors, and to our particular students? So I want to thank Chancellor Martin, because this was not an idea that came from the department, that came from me. This was an idea that was suggested to us by Chancellor Martin, who has had a lot of experience in other states and has now, in the short time that he's been in Colorado, come to realize that there are challenges, not just facing our institutions individually, but facing our state collectively and the whole system of higher ed. Right today, we're focusing on public higher ed, but we also know that private higher ed plays a significant role here too. And so, Mike, thanks for suggesting this. Mike then engaged the department and other representatives from the four-year state schools, from two-year schools, and to say, let's talk about, and so I want to thank Jerry Anderson. Where did Jerry go? For her very active participation in this. Because again, the idea was a little bit unfocused at first. It was really, how do we communicate better? How do we collaborate better around state goals? So I want to thank also Melanie Geary at the CSU System Office, who again made all the arrangements. And then last night, some of you were able to attend a reception that many of our legislators came to. And it's very clear that folks in the State House are very interested in what goes on here today and what goes on in higher education generally, because at some time or another, often many times during the year, they run into you. They run into you and your lobbyists pushing for particular things that will benefit your campuses and your students. And sometimes those legislators get a little frustrated because sometimes some schools will have a position that might be contrary to that of another school. Yes, that happens. So the legislators get a little frustrated, and they always say, we wish you guys could get together on these things and come together with a unified voice and approach us and tell us what we can do to help. And of course, we know that's very challenging. Now, my perspective comes from, of course, being first a student. When I first came to Colorado, I was a student at CU Boulder. And then watching my kids grow up here in Colorado and being the parent of students at Colorado institutions, one of whom, my last one of which, just graduated from CSU Pueblo. Wouldn't go there when I was there, but he did ultimately go there. He was also a product of PPCC. Again, wouldn't go there when I was there, but after Lance took over, I guess he was more interested. And in fact, he started out at Fort Lewis. Now, thank you, Dean. He survived 1 year. He didn't get a lot of credits, but he had a great time. But I think that is, I'm not proud of that, but it is, I think, an illustration of whether we like it or not. Our institutions really do share a common purpose, which is to get some of our Colorado kids through to a degree. We know that's increasingly important in this state. The governor recognizes it, the legislature recognizes it, certainly our business leaders recognize it, that if we want to have a truly competitive state that can compete for jobs and businesses, Don Ellman knows this as well as anybody, that we need to have a very strong higher education system, and we can't lose sight of the fact that we also need to be players in helping to ensure that our K through 12 system is strong. That's important for our state, and that's important for every one of our institutions, because we know, many of us anyway, have seats to fill. We have excess capacity, which we could fill easily if we could simply get more of our young people to graduate from high school and to graduate being college ready and motivated to go on. There are more than enough institutions to accommodate all those students, and there's more than enough students to fill our institutions, but we need to move away from this scarcity mentality that we all have, that we're competing for a limited number of students and a limited number of dollars. We can really change both of those things. We can change both sides of that equation. Money's a little bit harder than students, but if we work together, we can bring more students. That's been the goal of our legislature and our state for a long time, was we've tried to make sure that there are articulation agreements, guaranteed transfer courses that our students can move through efficiently. So here's a state, and by the way, let me back up a little bit. So I had those kids who graduated. I was the president of a 2-year university, president of a 4-year, worked as part of a system. Now work with the governor and work at the Department of Higher Ed. And one of the things that I've tried to do is remember that perspective I had as a student. Remember the perspective I had as a parent. Mostly try to remember the perspective I had as a campus president, when nothing annoyed me more than having something come down from the Department of Higher Education that I thought, what are these guys thinking? Do they even know what goes on at a campus? Do they know the impact that this will have on me as a campus leader, the impact this will have on my institution? Now I try to, again, as we do things here at the department, as we work with the commission, I do try very hard to maintain that perspective. And I'm very pleased that the latest addition to our department, who I'm just so pleased to hear with us this morning, is a young lady who I first worked with at the community college system when she was in the system office there, and Jennifer Sobanet. Jennifer has also had that experience. She's been at a community college at a system level and at a campus level. She's been at the CSU system with CSU Global. She understands how 4-year institutions work, and she understands the wave of the future that we all hear so much about in distance education. So when we met a week ago, I told her, one of the things, Jennifer, you're going to have to get used to is that as a representative of the department, your colleagues, the people you worked with closely before, are automatically going to view anything you say with just a little bit of suspicion and skepticism. That's just the way it goes. But I also said to her, it is really critically important, no matter what they think of you, that you remember that perspective as someone sitting on a campus. That everything that we do here, you should look at from this side, but then you should step back and imagine yourself sitting back in your seat at CSU or at Front Range Community College or at the system office for the community colleges and say, how would I feel about it if I were still sitting there? That is my goal with this department. Now I know it may not always seem that way to all of you, but trust me, that is a perspective we are trying to maintain, and we want that to be department-wide. Now, what I want to talk a little bit about is our statewide goals. Because you all have goals running your own campuses, but you also all participated in the development of a statewide master plan, in which we said, we don't want departments, we don't want to run your campuses. We don't want to tell you what programs to offer, what students to recruit, how many full-time and part-time faculty you should hire. Those are all decisions you need to make. But we do have some shared goals. As a state, we know that we need to produce more certificates and degrees. We know that too few of our adult population really have a credential to meet the workforce needs that we know are coming over the next decade. We know we need to have about 66%, 2/3 of our adults need to have some college credential. We know that in Colorado, among all 50 states, Colorado is at the bottom in terms of the states that will produce jobs over the next 10 years that will require only a high school diploma. We're about 5th from the top in terms of those states that will be producing jobs that will require a post-secondary credential. We know that we're 3rd in the country, behind only DC and Massachusetts, in the percentage of our adult population with a college degree, but we know we're still not close to that 66% goal, And we know that if you break it down by demographic groups, we're not doing a very good job of serving our fastest growing demographic, which is low income, first generation, and in particular Hispanic students. They are the workforce of the future. Our adult population now is 1/5 Hispanic, but our K through 12 population is 1/3. That's something that we need to be very focused on, and I don't think any institution in this state really serves proportionally the Latino community in their respective communities. We have a lot of HSIs, but even at CSU Pueblo and Adams State and several other schools that are HSIs, we could still improve. Ames Community College recently an HSI, Metro working on it. Those are things that we need to be thinking about. So we need to reach populations that we're not currently reaching. We need to produce more students, and we need to continue to do it efficiently. Colorado already produces more degrees per $100,000 invested than any other state. That's a testament to the great work that all of you do. We need to continue to be efficient, but we need to reach more kids, and we need to be less focused on enrollment and more focused on graduation. When I was at Pikes Peak Community College, I'll be the first to admit that as we were recruiting students, we were frankly thinking just about how do we get as many as we can through the door and get that first tuition check. And we did not focus nearly enough on how we could keep them, how we could make sure that they actually graduated. One of the first things Nancy McCallum did when she became system president was she held a president's meeting on site at a for-profit college. And what we heard there, I'll never forget, is their admissions director said, "You folks in public education have it all wrong. You do it all backwards. You make it hard to enroll and easy to leave." Well, think about that. We do. We put a lot of barriers in the way, especially of first-generation students who have no idea how to go through that process. And then once they're enrolled, too often we don't think about them much. And too often they quietly just disappear. That's something we need to do better. So the other thing, as we've said, second thing after improving degree production is improve retention rates. And of course those things are completely linked. And then reduce attainment gaps. I already addressed that. You know, we know that among first-generation African-American, Hispanic, and Native American students, we just don't do a very good job. So how do we address all those things working together? Well, right now, again, we all focus on the same thing. We want more money from the state. We want there to be fewer strings tied to it. It's exactly what I wanted when I was at Pikes Peak and CSU Pueblo. We want to be sure that we have almost a captive number of students who can fill our seats so that we can operate efficiently. We want to make sure we're getting at least as much as our other colleagues. So one of the things that we have to deal with every year as we get a state budget is then we have to sit down with all of you and your CFOs and figure out, well, who gets what? How do we do that? Everybody in this room has an argument. Few make it as forceful as, let's say, Steve Jordan, but historically, you know, we've been pounded and we have to make an adjustment. But of course, it's not just Steve who says that. It's a community college system. We have the small state colleges who all point out that they don't have the economies of scale or the access to other resources that the research colleges do. The research colleges and universities always point out, geez, their graduation rate is higher than anybody else's. They bring more dollars into the state than anybody else. They get proportionally fewer dollars from the state than anybody else. So they've been historically disadvantaged. So all of those arguments, frankly, are legitimate. And we fight them out every year. Even when I was at the community college system, even within systems, I know we fight it out. I remember fighting hard, saying that, hey, wait a minute, Pikes Peak doesn't get nearly as much money as it should compared to Trinidad or Morgan. And I don't care about those economies of scale. I need that money. So we go through that every year. Now, again, that's not what today is about. Today's saying, how do we think about maximizing resources and students for all of our institutions, and again, reaching those state goals, which really aren't really about our institutions at all, but are about building a stronger Colorado. Stronger not just economically, but making sure that we have the kind of students who can serve in leadership positions in business and in government, in our civic and arts organizations. Those things are important. Those that to have the kind of state we all want to have. So those are the things that we need to be thinking about. And I will say that what this leads to often is a lot of what I would describe as schizophrenic behavior by all of you, and frankly by me too sometimes. Because here's what I typically hear when something comes from the state or from the Department of Higher Education, or actually from another institution. Half of you will say, God dang it, why doesn't the Department of Higher Ed enforce the rules a little bit more? Why doesn't it get in and referee these disputes and stop School A from doing something that will hurt School B? And at the very same time, we'll hear from School B saying, why doesn't DHE just back out, back away, you're not giving us that much money, and let us do things as we should? And then the very next issue that comes along, School A and School B will reverse positions. And depending on the issue, say instead, higher ed needs to be more aggressive about controlling things. And the same school that a month before was telling me to back off or telling me to enforce rules more strictly will now say, back off. That's the kind of tightrope we have to walk constantly. I think it's a tension that's natural. It happens in every state. You know, it happens with every government agency. We often wonder why government has to get involved when we don't think they should. And then when something happens that we don't like, we wonder, where the heck was government? And why weren't they fixing this? Why didn't they see this coming? Those are the things that we have to address right now. So as some of you may seek to offer new programs or offer them at a different location or through a different medium, those are the kind of things that you want us to leave you alone to do, because you're hearing every day, we want schools to operate more like a business. Go out and figure out how to generate revenue. Go out and figure out how to do things more efficiently. So you want us to give you free rein. But on the other hand, you also want us to help divvy up markets and allocate resources in a way that requires a much heavier hand from the department and from the state. So let's talk about how do we do that. You know, there are oftentimes, again, I say I want to maintain the perspective of a college president, and I don't want DHE getting in my business. But then what you all see is me leading the Department of Higher Ed getting in your business. So, you know, I understand that's a frustration, it's a tension, it's natural, it's not going to go away, but it's something we need to talk about more effectively. And we need to think about how not just you as campus leaders can collaborate with other campus leaders and even with other K through 12 leaders, but how you can also collaborate with the department and with the legislature and with the executive branch to help you be more effective at helping us to achieve those state goals. So I'll stop there. You all, again, all know the challenges that we face as a state. You certainly know the challenges you face at your respective institutions. Those challenges are not unique to any one of you. They just vary a little bit from institution to institution. Some of you have more students than you can accommodate. Some of you don't have nearly enough. Some of you do a good job of getting grants from the federal government. Some of you have never seen one. Those are things, though, that we need to be talking about. How can we, again, collaborate to move away from a mentality of scarcity to a mentality that entertains possibilities about what we can do if we can simply graduate more students who are both college ready and motivated to go on, how we can reach more adults who would love to have the benefit of a post-secondary credential if we're going to figure out how to accommodate them and bring them back, and how we can create the most amazing state in the country by just having a stronger and more consistent, more effective higher education system here in Colorado. That's what we're here to talk about. I so appreciate the fact that all of you, who I know have many, many things to do, took the time to be here today. Thank you.